60 seconds. I'll kick us off when we are flashing live. Center myself ever so slightly. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that little break of networking. Just in case this is your first panel of the day, I am Dave Meckelberg of Wade and Wendy, and also one of the organizers of the Recruitment Automation Conference and our day today. I'm really excited for this conversation, which is titled Inclusive from the Start, Building an Equitable Top of Funnel and Candidate Experience. So I'm going to be introducing our moderator, who is Drew Austin, someone I know very well, who is the CEO and co-founder of Wade and Wendy. So I will let him take it away and enjoy this conversation.
Thank you, Dave. So yes, so I'm really excited for this discussion. I think it's going to be, there's so much to cover. When Dave slipped up and said we had till 3:25, I got a little excited, but we only have till 2:25. But I'm hoping to cover a wide range of topics today. The title of this is Inclusive from the Start, Building an Equitable Top of Funnel and Candidate Experience. And there's just so many aspects of the recruiting process where we need to be mindful of how we are approaching diversity and inclusion and making sure that people feel inclusive throughout the entire process, not just from acquisition or during an interview, but every step of the way from our messaging, communications, etc. So before we even get started, let's let our panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Madhavi.
Hi, thank you so much, Drew. Hi, everybody. I know we can't see each other. This is the best that we can do while we are in place and are at home. So super excited to be here. I'm glad that Wade and Wendy could put this together. We could have a sense of networking and meeting other people as best as we can. My name is Madhavi. I lead diversity, inclusion, and belonging at Okta. Okta is basically an identity and access management company. And I'm usually very excited when I talk about diversity and inclusion at Okta because to me, the bottom line of our business is identity management. And I'm like, we cannot do identity management just on platform and securing identities online if we don't talk about how much identities are important in our day-to-day, in our workplace, in our social setting. And that is basically my role here at Okta, where I help drive those conversations and guide our efforts at building a more inclusive culture. So super excited to be here and look forward to the conversation and learning more from Cathy and Georgene.
That's great. Well, Cathy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Cathy Neal, and I am the Talent Innovation Lead at Bayer. And my responsibilities really span across all three divisions. So we have the consumer division, which I know most people are very familiar with. We have our pharma division as well as our agricultural division. And one of my major responsibilities is not just to look at how we have innovative processes, projects and programs, as well as technology throughout the company and bringing those inward. It's also very much a passion of mine to focus those efforts on diversity. So from a technological standpoint, from a process standpoint, and from a program standpoint, are we also being inclusive that way? So really excited to be here with a group of people that have the same goals and care about this issue a lot.
Fantastic. And Georgene.
Hi, it's so great to be with you, Drew and Cathy and Madhavi. My name is Georgene, and Georgene Huang, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of a New York-based startup called Fairy God Boss. Our mission is to make the lives and workplaces for women much better than they are today. So we have a focus on gender equality and inclusion and diversity, and we have worked with probably 200 companies at this point, mostly very large enterprises, to help them understand best practices and programs and policies and benefits that will make their workplaces more attractive and inclusive for women.
Fantastic. So, it's great. We have a really good mix of people on the panel today because, we have some people that are building products, like, our company, Wade and Wendy, does recruitment automation technology. And it's important that we are, if we're building technology that's going to facilitate more efficient, more informative recruiting experiences for candidates and recruiters, we need to make sure that we are taking into consideration diversity and inclusion, and making sure that that's involved from the building process up. And so for us, this is very important to hear feedback directly from the people that are using these technologies, so that we can shape these platforms and continue to improve them and iterate them as we go. So let's get started at the top. So how does I want to my first question, and Cathy, maybe I'll ask this question to you.
Okay.
How does diversity and inclusion factor into your recruitment branding? There's sensitivity around some of the messaging, and how do you approach the challenges of marketing and trying to build a brand that is D&I focused?
Okay. Well, I think from that perspective, there are a couple of things. I think from a global standpoint, making sure people see themselves in the branding that you do. So not just thinking of, but also what geographies they're in, what appeals to them, and making sure that they see wherever they are across the globe that they are represented in your company. Another thing that I think is really important when you think about that is looking at your total structure from a benefit, from a compensation, and from a promotion standpoint, and making sure that you're talking about all of those things across the board. So for instance, if you are a female in some cases, hearing about some benefits might not be as much of interest to you as other benefits would. If you are a person of color, there are things that could really appeal to me that won't appeal to someone else. So making sure that your people on the ground are really familiar with everything that your company has to offer, and making sure that you're not making assumptions and that you present all of the information to everyone, because somewhere within that scope, they're going to see something that speaks to them and that appeals to them, and also making sure that you have benefits that are inclusive. And so I think from a marketing standpoint, from a branding standpoint, really focusing on making sure that everyone is represented, and also represented in different ways. Sometimes you see these multicultural teams and you see pictures, but everybody looks exactly the same. Like they took one person and sort of carbon cut them across the board. So making sure that you're thinking of diversity really from every aspect in the way that it is.
Got it. Madhavi, you want to add anything?
I think what Cathy said is spot on. For us at Okta, one thing that has worked pretty well is understanding, first looking inward. So for us, the idea was like, is the way we are setting up our brand, because we are providing single sign-on across different companies, the way we are setting up our brand, is it something to, and to re-emphasize what Cathy said, talking to a wide range of audiences? Because if it is not, the personas that you are putting forth in terms of how you're marketing your brand should also be personas that are reflective of just of the wider community that you are serving. And apart from that, one piece that we have put a lot of emphasis on is use of inclusive language, because understand, like, words have meaning, it carries a lot of weight. So it's not only what you're portraying, but how you're portraying it, what you're saying is very important. One common example I usually bring up is we put in so much effort into like, how should we write our job descriptions? And we want to make that like inclusive language. And this is not just for Okta, but generally we have seen the hiring managers would repost that on LinkedIn and say, I'm looking for a rock star candidate. And that language might not be very inclusive, because a lot of like women might not identify with being a rock star, like you're minimizing your pool. So in terms of creating our brand, we are very conscious to ensure that we bring in more inclusive language and try to promote their use, not just as Okta, but in the wider community. So apart from the visual brand, it's also the language that we focus a lot on.
Got it, got it. So, and Georgina, what I wanted to ask you actually is, you see so many different companies presenting different types of messages to reach, a diverse audience. Tell me about your experience, and how do you, and what tips or guidance would you give to, companies to make sure that they're using potentially like inclusive messaging even in their branding and their postings.
I think that Cathy and Madhavi are already aware of the need, and not all companies are. So I think that that's great, because that's the starting point, is just understanding that you do have to package yourself up as an employer of choice to different kinds of people. As basic as that sounds, and as basic as that is, like in terms of a marketing principle, it's something that we don't always see everybody understanding. So the same company underneath, we sort of use an analogy to shampoo. Like my husband and I both use shampoo, but the way it's sold, the way it smells, the stuff inside of, like, we'll both get our hair cleaned at the end of the day, but how that's packaged up, the words on the bottle, the advertisement that goes along with it really matters. And I think the best companies do understand that there's multiple personas and types of people. And I think it's really hard, particularly when you're talking about, practically speaking, real estate being your career page, to do everything. So I think some of the best companies realize and try to go beyond the limitations of their own career site and say, where do I reach people with this message for this kind of person? Where do I reach more people intentionally with a different message? So even though inside it's all the same stuff.
So I want to piggyback that one. Now that we've talked a little bit about recruitment branding, let's actually get into some actionable ways that you can ensure diverse candidates are finding out about opportunities. For us at Wade and Wendy, I think this is one of our real important missions, is that we say, one of our constant discussions with our customers is, you can't hire diverse candidates if you don't have a diverse pipeline. And if diverse candidates are not finding out about your job opportunities, if you're not reaching them. So for, so internally with our team, our product focus has been, focusing on the right partnerships, the right communities, the right distribution, the right advertising, the right outreach, so that we can make sure that we can bridge the gap between these job opportunities and these niche diverse communities. So let's talk a little bit about let's talk about, how do you ensure diverse candidates are finding opportunities? Cathy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so that's something that I've had a lot of focus on lately. And when I've been looking at innovative tools, processes, and programs, I know everybody talks about AI and everybody talks about job boards, but we've sort of evolved past that, I think, in the second round of how we do things. So I think if I see a site and they're telling me the way that you are going to get diverse candidates is that we have associations with all of these different other websites, well, talent people have been there and done that. So what type of content are you providing? What type of communities are you building? Were you going to bring passive candidates into those online sites or into your organization to build an active community, so that when I'm posting my job there, so that when I'm using your tool, I know that you're not just attached to a diversity site, but that you're also going out into the community and bringing energy in to find diversity. If you have a program, the program can't just be around, again, the same version of post and pray. So telling everyone that you really support diversity and it's really exciting. What are you doing to connect the people, the technology, and the programs that's going to give it energy? And if you don't do that, you're not going to get results. You're going to get talk, and it's really the lazy way out.
Cathy, are there any examples of those types of communities that you could even you could share with the audience, or anything that comes top of mind?
Yeah, so I adore Power to Fly. I look at what your jet is doing, very innovative and forward. I look at Hire a Tool, how they're not just having like the sort of online virtual conferences, but they're actually going out and seeking people, bringing them in, connecting with different organizations. So when you pop up online, they've done all the back work that you would have done running around on the ground. And people, especially people of color, really, I find, are really technically savvy. They like energy around being talked to like a person, being treated like a human. And I think some of those just real basic concepts that people often forget are the things that really bring diversity in. So I think just having energy, having community behind whatever you do, whether that be online whether that be in a program, whether that be as you're evaluating new processes. Also making sure that you're working really closely with those resource groups within your organization. Great people, especially minority communities, tend to be closed. So for instance, if I talk to Madhavi's not just going to know great people in HR. If she's a leader in her community, she's going to know great scientists that are within her culture. She's going to know great doctors. She's going to know great PR people. So building your network collectively in a way that, again, you can bring energy to those processes and programs. It doesn't have to always be online. And making sure if you're on the ground person, that you are networking, you're talking to people, and you're making sure that you're staying in touch and not coming across like I'm just calling you because we have this diversity program, but really doing the extra work to see what jobs do you really have available that I can go into, because my time is just as valuable as anybody else's. So you getting me on the phone and telling me about this great diversity program, having me put a resume together and never calling me back doesn't work for me, but it doesn't work for any professional.
No.
So giving that same respect and recognizing what we really bring to the table, whether you be a person of color, a veteran, LGBTQA, all of us have something to bring to the table that's of value, and really recognizing talent when you see it in the same way and with the same respect goes along.
So Georgene, you've actually built a community like this. So can you talk a little bit about that experience in building a community that can provide a diverse talent pool for companies?
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work to get people to trust each other, to engage with each other. But I think there's a real need, because when you are in a room that's for everyone, minorities of whatever kind, just their voices aren't as heard. And so that was the idea behind creating a community just for women. But even in doing that, I mean, intersectional experiences, women of color have their unique experiences and points of view. And we have tried really hard to make sure there's space for micro communities, for lack of a better word. People can find other LGBTQ members in our community through groups or through threads of conversation. That's really, really important. And we actually recently, even though it's very invasive, when you think about you're joining an online community, you get asked those questions. But if you don't get asked those questions, then we'll never know how diverse we really are. And so we ask everyone who joins our community if they're comfortable, anonymously sharing what they are, so that we can make sure that we are going after, to Cathy's point, reaching out to groups where we're not represented.
Madhavi, let me ask you a different type of question now. So let's think about, so that was more about we have to advertise, we have to promote, we have to market, but then there's also the passive, like we have to do some proactive outreach to actually get our message out there and target, people in these diverse communities. So two-part question. One is, how does diversity impact your outbound messaging when targeting, talent? And two, like what sort of tooling or strategies do you use to identify and reach these people?
That's a great question. I think in terms of the messaging, for us, the idea, it's very important, and I'm borrowing a lot from what Cathy said. The idea is the messaging has to come across as not, I'm reaching out to you, whether that's an individual or a community, just because you're going to be a number on my diversity report. I want to increase my number from 2% to 2.5%. So for that 0.5% gap, I need to bring in X number of people. You have to be very mindful of the mindset with which you're approaching, because a lot that's happening also is the minority community is realizing that they have become a numbers game. Every company wants to hire them because they want to showcase that or reflect that, like, these are the metrics against which we have succeeded. For us, it's very important to make sure that the first thing that we try to bring on is share about Okta. This is the culture at Okta. We have a hashtag which we say life at Okta. Because the idea is, it's not about like, we need you. We need to tell you who we are, what is the culture at Okta, and to invite you to explore that culture. And then create a relationship, find that balance of like trust, and then bring them in terms of these are the opportunities. We see you as, you know, a great addition to our team, and would you like to explore us? So the first point of our messaging is not like, oh, we have a job opening, like let's come talk. It's about exactly what Cathy said, connecting with those communities, making sure we are telling people in these communities more about Okta. What is the culture? What is the life here? These are the communities. We showcase a lot of work that our ERG groups do, that our employee experience teams do, so that they get a flavor of what it would be to if they were to join Okta. And then approaching them, I think that sets that trust and that relationship, which is not like Cathy said, like I'm going to just ask you for your resume and then it's fine. I'm not going to call you back just because, you know, I want to check a box. So for us, building that trust is very, very important. And we make sure like all the communities that we go to and the events that we attend, we actually create what we call a talent community out of that. And we call this like, you know, hire later talent. Might be we went to a job fair where we found like 20 folks who were amazing, but we obviously don't have 20 openings right now. So what we do is we put them into a talent community and make sure that we are keeping our relationship with them warm. We are telling them like, you know, this is a new event around like Latinx month that Okta did. This is what our ERG groups are doing. So we continue to create that sense of community and interaction with them so that we can continue to build that relation. And when the role and position opens, we can reconnect with them. So keeping the pipeline warm and your prospects warm, like you do in sales, is, I think, the approach that we adopted Okta, just not because like coming in cold and hiring you because you belong to a specific demographic group. We want to be very conscious of making sure that we value you because of the skills that you bring in. And we want to make sure that you also see value in us as a workplace that you would be proud of being a part of. So that's the kind of relationship we want to develop.
Got it. I think we lost Georgene for a second, but it's digital conferences. So I'm sure she'll be back in there in a second. But Cathy, do you want to just talk to that a little bit in terms of your outbound messaging style or approach? Do you have any techniques or tips that you can provide to the audience?
Okay. Well, again, I think first and foremost, always being respectful and purposeful with people's time. I think showcasing what you have to offer. I heard a really long time ago when I was a baby recruiter, and I won't date myself, but it's not the sausage, it's sizzle. So everyone has a job. So how are you going to appeal to me? And part of that can be what you offer to people of diverse cultures. And the other things are addressing people's needs just like everyone else. And I think definitely having a strategy around everything you do. So if your students are buying a new school and you're investing millions of dollars, did you ask yourself, how is this going to address diversity? If you're a mid-level manager and you're putting together your plan for the year, did you ask yourself and put real strategy and the same amount of effort into reaching out and hiring diverse cultures as you did into hiring IT tech and engineers? And if you're on the ground and you're recruiting, I say one of the biggest lessons I learned in building diverse candidate pools is don't make assumptions. People really have the same needs. So I'm not at my current company, but at a previous company, people would tell me, well, we have all of these plant locations and a Black person won't go here, or a person of Middle Eastern descent wouldn't go here. I asked them, and guess what? I had more people of color from every single culture in towns with one stop sign than you would believe. And we had talent that we couldn't find and really needed to bring into the organization. And one of my biggest joys, and probably why I've stayed in the recruiting space and not moved outside of that, is that when I left, people were promoting, they were leading, and they got that experience that they needed to move into other parts of the organization. So I really do, when people talk about diverse hiring pools, it's more than just finding a whole bunch of people and making sure you have people on the slate. It's really taking the extra time not to be lazy. It is really asking and presenting everything that you have to everyone and making sure that you're giving people access so that they can put themselves out there and they can decide if they're qualified, where they want to go and what they want to do. And I think you'll be surprised at the results that you get.
Okay, great. So I'm going to shift again. So let's now move to the funnel. Let's talk through, okay, you have talent in the funnel. What do you do to ensure that diverse candidates have a great experience coming through the process? So we've given some advice on how to attract talent. What are some of the best practices you've seen to make sure that that these candidates feel heard, that they feel included, and that the experience is, and then it's a quality experience for them as well? Madhavi, let's start with you. You're muted, Madhavi. Hold on. Let me just unmute you. Sorry here.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a great question. I think we can spend one full hour on that. There is that we can do around that.
Dave did give us till 3:25.
Okay. I'll respect that. Back old in the days when we used to have like on-site interviewing, I think there were a lot of things, like there are a lot of, I think, clues that your candidates get when they come in. Even things like, when they walk into the building, like if you have a lot of like employee or event like hang-ups on the wall, like what is the community that you're trying to showcase? Do you have like the same homogeneous demographic that you're showcasing across when the candidates walk in? That's a huge experience, and that's going to either make them comfortable or feel like, I guess I won't belong here even if I get the job. And that's going to have a lot of impact on them. Even simple things like, do you have gender neutral restrooms? You will have a candidate come in, check in, use the restrooms. Like, what are the signs on your restroom? These are clues that you might not think about related to hiring, but this is when the experience starts, when they start seeing whether I'll belong here or not belong here. And those are like small pieces that you can definitely tweak on. The challenge, I guess, is even more now with virtual interviewing and hiring, because you don't have room to showcase those cues. You cannot do that. So a lot rests on the recruiter and the hiring managers to be able to communicate that. And that job is now getting even more difficult. A few things, and I've heard this is one of the, I think, standard suggestions that we get is make sure that your interview panel is diverse, which is a great suggestion. But the point is, if you don't have a diverse workforce already, you're tapping into those limited number of people and asking them to interview more and more, and you're taking time away from their actual work. These interviews are not going to help in their performance reviews. And then so you just need to balance, like, just don't go all in on like, you need a diverse slate. What else can you do? Can you pull in members from your ERG groups? Can you pull in members from like your DNI? Like, don't always, if you want to showcase the culture, you don't always rely on those one or two diverse people on your team to be on the interview slate. You can definitely have them, but also be mindful how much pressure you're putting on them. And the most important thing is, I think, interview training is very important. I think a lot of hiring managers think like, I have hired for like 20 years now. I like don't need a training on that. Hiring 20 years ago was very different than it is now. You have so many millennials coming in. You can't be like, I hired the same folks there. Like, I'm going to hire the same people now. So I am a huge proponent of like hiring trainings for interviewers, for hiring managers, to make sure that they understand what the nuances are. We all are not conscious of our unconscious biases. There's a reason why it's called unconscious. And these trainings help you address a lot of those issues. And my favorite point where I lead a lot of these trainings is, one, to have structured questions, but also don't start your questions with like just simply like, how was your weekend? Because then someone will say like, oh, I went like golfing. And that's the point where you click with someone and you're going to ask all the easy questions. You're not going to ask skill-based questions because you love golfing too. But if you have someone else who's saying like, I've never golfed, I don't know what the game is. And then you're like, okay, let me just get to the questions, ask you everything that's like important. And then you're going to evaluate both the candidates very differently. So I need to continue to talk to hiring managers about this. And they want to hire the best person. So they will not remember all these pieces, but the fact that you need to keep coming back to these trainings to refresh how you can do it is kind of important, and that reflects hugely on what the candidate experience is. It's not what questions you're asking, as I said, but it's how you're asking them. Am I asking you something because already I've made up an opinion about you? Or I'm asking to learn more about you. So the place from which you're coming is going to have a huge impact on the candidate experience. And I'll just close by saying one thing. Once you bring someone in for an interview, say you're bringing a couple of candidates and you're going to hire one person, but be as respectful of the other people who you did not choose and give them some feedback that they can improve on. I know with like the legal and HR issues, you can't provide too much feedback, but even like an informal chat of like, these are the things like you were great at, these are your strengths, like give feedback to people, especially if they are from the minority community, because that's going to help them in their next interview and in their next opportunity. So be respectful of that as well.
I was gonna ask Cathy if you wanted to add anything, but Madhavi knocked that out of the park.
Yeah, pretty much covered everything and then some, and had some great info. Yeah,
that was great.
yeah.
No, that was really good. So let me move to this question that I'd like everyone to try to touch on, and then there's a couple of questions coming from the audience that I'll try to get some time for. Let's talk about how do you measure success. For us to make progress in this area, we need to be thinking about what does success look like. What are the key KPIs? What are the metrics? Are there things that we're not thinking about that we should be thinking about in terms of tracking and performance? So Georgene, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on how do we measure success? What are important metrics? Things of that nature. And then I'm going to give everyone this question.
Sure. I mean, I think most people will start with some kind of understanding of where they are today in terms of diversity demographics. That can be a little more difficult than it might initially seem, especially if you're starting from a place of poor data and depending on the size of the organization. Also, it's very difficult for a lot of companies we see to get down to department level or if you have multiple offices, like how do you measure it across? Good number is what I'm trying to say, looking across a whole company, but less good numbers when you look at certain divisions or departments or job functions or seniority levels. And so it involves creating all these definitions. It's not very sexy, but it's important logistical data gathering and definitions. And then I think inclusion is so important, but isn't captured in any of that, right? So you have an employee engagement feedback loop. Does that happen only once a year? How are you capturing who's getting promoted, who's leaving, and do you get those sort of inclusive questions during exit? Do you fold that into exit interview processes? Do you fold that into your managers? Or I think a lot of companies right now are looking at tying executive and leadership like pay or bonuses to outcomes related to diversity. But is it just numbers of demographics, or is it also inclusion metrics? And I hear less about these inclusion metrics. Because I think it's harder. It's by definition more subjective.
Absolutely. Cathy, you want to add anything there?
I think one metric, I think Georgene covered a lot of the basics. The only thing I would be able to think to add is, are you measuring the actual outreach and the scope? So yes, we're doing hires, we're doing retention, we're doing, when I think of quality of hire, when you think of those inclusion metrics and their quality of their experience and KPIs, but are you also measuring the strategy? So how much are you really doing? How much of it is real? Like, how many real conversations are you having with minority engineers? Or are you just sort of doing this big email blast? Set up, because I think a lot of that organization and that strategy and real hands-on work is what leads to success. And if you're not tracking, if you're not organized about it, for instance, if you're just talking to one person and sending them on an interview, but you don't have any way to loop back and see what your candidate pool and what your list really looks like, then I don't think that you're going to be able to make the type of success that enables you to meet your KPIs. So outside of those things, those are the only things that I think that I could really add.
Okay. And Mavi, do you have any other thoughts there in terms of metrics and success?
I think my co-panelists covered it well. I completely agree with Georgene. Like the inclusion metrics are very, very important. They are very difficult, but you can definitely get a sense from like your pulse surveys, your employee engagement surveys, in trying and understanding how people are feeling that. And obviously we, especially at Okta, we also have like your interview experience survey. So those things can like, what are the things you can improve on? But that's where a lot of challenges, and that's where a huge is a place that we can make a lot of difference, because this is not just about numbers, it's also about the experience, the quality of the experience.
Totally.
Mhm.
And I'll add a little bit there is like, we, our platform, Wade and Wendy, we are, obviously very data focused. It's a conversation platform. Everything that we do is pretty much data driven. I find that there's a lot of really interesting insights that I think we're all just scratching the surface on the entire process of engagement. So, what can we learn about how people interact with different types of opportunities from different diversity backgrounds based on the job type or the complexity of the job? Are people interacting with and again, we focus mostly top of funnel, so I'm more on the acquisition side, but are they interacting and engaging with your marketing or your job ads or your plot process through mobile or web? And does the mobile or web experience have to be catered in a different way? Are people, I think and I just think there's so much interesting. And then from our perspective, because it's conversational, we get to ask follow-up questions. So there's a lot of really interesting insights. When someone says, I'm not interested in the job, we're actually able to ask them why. And you start to provide those talent orgs, our customers, back insights as to, what was it that turned this person off? And if you start to see patterns as to the reasons why a given job didn't resonate with people, because you're still presenting them that opportunity, they're engaging and learning about the opportunity, but maybe they say, this is not for me. Was it the compensation? Was it the perks? Was it the shifts? So I think that we also really need to be mindful of some of the new data that we're acquiring for the first time because of all the technology that's available to us. What are we learning? What new patterns are available? What new insights can we extract? And how do we then iterate on that feedback to start to improve our processes? So just something else to think about, because we spend a lot of time now really digging into data and presenting as much data as we can back to our end clients, which are the talent orgs, so they can learn more and more about their own recruiting process to improve it. So let's. I think we may have a couple more minutes. Let me see if we got a bunch of questions here. One was. This one starts to come up quite a bit. So it seems like, how do we balance managing talent pools? And Mavi, you brought up talent pools before, while we're still trying to deliver, actual hires. Another person asked, hey, we have 40,000 applications at RBC. We can't, even have the bandwidth to talk to all these applicants, which I think it was Brian Convery, definitely talked to Wade and Wendy's team, because that's what we do. The ability to engage candidates at scale. But Mavi, what are your thoughts on making sure that everyone gets the attention, and also building talent pools while trying to focus on a given job?
Yeah, and that's a tricky balance, to be honest. If you need to fill a rec in 30 days, 20 days, whatever depending on your rec load, you will not have enough time to be like, okay, let me create a talent pool for this. The idea is your recruiting and talent acquisition team will have to continuously create and nurture a talent pool that can be brought into when you actually need a rec. So it will take you some time. If you haven't invested in building that talent pool, then you cannot expect the return in the next 2 or 3 months. You will have to spend a good number of months, I would say 6 to 9 months, connecting with these communities, attending these events, and then you have created a talent pool which can then lead into your funnel. So you have to understand there will be some lag time. It's not like I want D&I hiring, where's the talent pool? That's how you will have to devote time to build that. But you will see the returns a year or 9 months down the line. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not going to be a quick fix. It takes a lot of heavy lifting at the back end to be able to make that commitment and that connection.
Great. So we are exactly at time. And guys, we can also, if Madhavi, Cathy, Georgene, if you want to answer any other questions, feel free to do it in the chat as well, because there were other commentary coming in throughout. Thank you guys for doing this. This has been fantastic. What a great panel. And I hope everyone's really enjoying this conference. I'm thoroughly enjoying all the content right now. I'm sitting here giddy just listening to everyone. So this has been wonderful. I guess Dave, are you going to probably jump on here any second and give us and bring on the next group, I guess. Yep, there he is.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. That was fantastic. That was a really wonderful conversation, everyone.
Thanks,
Cathy, Georgene, Drew. Excellent. So thank you, everyone. Tight. We have our next conversation coming in about 4 minutes. It is on combating bias in candidate evaluation. Be moderated by Frida Polly, who is the CEO and founder of Pymetrics. I did want to shout out Pymetrics is one of the organizations that is helping to sponsor the donation drive to Code 2040, which if this is your first talk of the day, is an incredible organization working and Latino and Latina representation in technology. They're the largest racial equity organization in technology, and we have set up a donation drive to benefit them, the details of which are posted in both the stage and main event channels. They are pinned to the top. So definitely check those out. Thank you to Frida and her team. This next conversation should be just as incredible as the last several. A really important conversation about how to combat bias on the evaluation side once you are bringing candidates into your process and seeing what happens to them. So stick around. We still have a million amazing things to go for the rest of the day. Thank you to everyone here, and we will see you in just a few minutes.